So, what happens after we die? I mean, for thousands of years, it's been one of the biggest questions we humans ask. In this explainer, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to use the Bible itself as our source text to try and build a roadmap of the afterlife it describes.
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? So let's just park our own personal beliefs and cultural ideas for a moment. What does the biblical text actually say? That's the map we're going to try and piece together.
And yeah, we're not expecting to find some simple travel brochure here. Instead, think of this like we're cartographers, map makers. We're piecing together different passages from all over the text to see what kind of big picture roadmap emerges. All right, so here's our plan for the journey. We'll start with the moment of death, then explore this idea of a waiting room, then a great reunion, a final judgment, and finally, the two eternal destinies that are described. So you can see the whole path laid out right there, from death all the way to a final destination. This is the 5-step sequence that the Bible seems to lay out. So let's start at the very beginning with step 1.
So, every journey has to have a starting point, right? And for this roadmap, it's obviously the moment of death. So, how does the Bible actually frame this first crucial step?
It's interesting. The Bible kind of holds these two almost contradictory ideas about death at the same time. On one hand, it's presented as this natural process, from dust you came and to dust you will return. But on the other hand, it's seen as an enemy, this intruder that wasn't part of the original plan and is one day going to be completely defeated. Both of those ideas are held in tension.
Okay, let's move on to our second stop on the map. And honestly, this is probably the most mysterious and definitely the most debated part of the entire journey, that time between when a person dies and the final resurrection. So you'll hear theologians call this the intermediate state, which sounds a bit formal, right? That's why the waiting room is a really good way to think about it. It's a holding period, and it's in this waiting room that you find the most disagreement among interpreters.
So when it comes to what's happening in this waiting room, you've basically got two main schools of thought. The most common view is that the soul stays conscious, that believers are with the Lord, and the unrighteous are in a state of anguish. But there's also a minority view called soul sleep, which suggests the dead are totally unconscious, and their very next conscious moment is the resurrection itself.
Okay, and to really get a handle on this waiting room idea, we have to clear up a couple of key terms: Sheol and Hades. In the Bible, both of these words refer to this interim realm of the dead. And here's the crucial distinction. It is a temporary holding place. It's not the final eternal destination that we commonly think of as hell. A lot of the confusion comes from some translations just using the word hell for both places.
All right, so after that waiting period, we get to what many people would say is the real climax of the whole story, the resurrection. And listen, this isn't about becoming a ghost. It's something way more real, way more tangible. This right here, this is an absolutely core concept. The ultimate hope you see presented in the Bible isn't about floating on a cloud as some disembodied spirit. No way. The promise is a physical one. A new, glorified, resurrected body that's fit for a new creation.
And this whole promise really hangs on two big ideas. First, Jesus' own resurrection is seen as the model, the prototype, and the guarantee that it will happen for others. And second, this event is described as being for everyone. Both the just and the unjust will be raised, but, as we'll see, for very different reasons.
And that brings us directly to the next major landmark on our map. Because right after this great reunion comes the great accounting, the final judgment.
So the way this is described, it's this moment of total clarity, of ultimate accountability. It's maybe not a trial in the way we think of it, to determine guilt or innocence. It's more like a moment where a person's life, their deeds, their actions, are just laid bare as the evidence of where their true faith and allegiance really were.
So this is a big question, right? How do grace and works fit together here? Well, the theology goes something like this. Salvation itself is a gift from God, received through faith. A person's actions, or their works, they aren't the source of that salvation, but they're seen as the essential evidence, the fruit, if you will, that proves the faith was real in the first place.
And as you can imagine, this judgment leads directly to the final stops on our roadmap. After all the accounting is done, the Bible lays out two very distinct, very permanent, eternal outcomes.
So, the first destiny, it's not just going to heaven in the way we might picture it. The language used in the Bible is actually so much bigger than that. It talks about eternal life with God in a totally renewed and restored physical creation.
what it calls the new heavens and new earth, where God literally dwells with his people.
Now, for the second destiny, the Bible uses some really powerful, really stark imagery. You'll see terms like Gehenna, which was actually a real garbage dump on fire outside Jerusalem, and this lake of fire. These are the pictures used to describe the place of final punishment and separation from God.
And you know, even among people who agree on the roadmap up to this point, there are different interpretations of what this final punishment actually is. The traditional view is eternal conscious torment. Another view, called annihilationism, suggests the unrighteous are ultimately destroyed and cease to exist. And then there's a third, less common view of universal reconciliation, which proposes that everyone is eventually saved.
But here's the key takeaway. Regardless of how you interpret the specifics, the crucial point of the roadmap is this fork in the road. The journey ends with two separate and final destinies, and which path you're on is determined at the final judgment. And there you have it. That's the full roadmap we've just walked through. From the moment of death into that interim state, then the physical resurrection, the final judgment, and finally, that split into one of two final destinies. When you piece it all together, this is the consistent story that emerges from the text.
Okay, so we've just spent all this time charting a map of the end, but that leaves us with one last, really powerful question. If this is the roadmap for what's next, how is that supposed to change the way we actually live, right here, today?